The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. The United States Supreme Court, by not acting yesterday, has made it effectively okay for Sandy Hook families to sue Remington Arms, a gun manufacturer. So there was some confusion about this when the news broke, where the Supreme Court declined to take the case. And that meant that the previous decision stands, which is that indeed lawsuits can go forward against Remington, which is going to be, I mean, listen, this is actually a bigger legal question in general. You know, we have the status quo of huge amounts of gun ownership in the United States. We have debate and controversy over the Second Amendment and background checks and different laws. But one of the things that is really a less discussed issue is if someone gets a gun and does something bad with it, is the manufacturer of the gun even conceivably responsible? Now, all that's happened is that the lawsuits can be filed. This tells us nothing, Pat, about the outcome of those lawsuits, but it's step one in an important issue in the country.
Yeah, and the case that the Sandy Hook families are making is that the Remington Gun Company are specifically marketing their weapons as being able to be used to kill other people,
right?
Not just like something that you can use at a shooting range or hunting, but to actually, I think Remington would say defend oneself, but
right.
You know, they don't always market it that way. One ad that they have out describes the weapon as being able to, it says, forces opposition, bow down, you are single-handedly outnumbered, which makes it seem like you're able to like go on the offense with these weapons. And if you can make that case, then it stands to reason, I think, that maybe they should be held responsible. But it's a tricky thing because they're at the end of the day not the ones pulling the trigger on the gun. And people always try to say like, well, it's not the gun itself, it's the person behind the gun. And you would think that maybe that argument would win out.
So there's a couple different things. One is if you apply this to vehicles, if a drunk driver gets behind the seat of a Toyota and runs someone over, there have not, to my knowledge, been successful lawsuits against Toyota because their car was used in that way, in the commission of a crime in that sense. So that's one analogy that's often made, and I think that there is something to think about there. The bigger issue is that even if the argument that Pat proposes is a reasonable one, there's a lot of legal protections for the gun manufacturers. There's actually a law from 2005, the PLCAA, which stands for Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, which says if the sale of the arms is lawful commerce, as the name suggests, the gun manufacturers and the dealers as well have pretty broad legal protection from lawsuits. And there has been fear for a long time within the gun industry that at a certain point, one of these lawsuits was going to get through. And we will see what happens. I'm interested in this. So I'm very interested in this, Pat, because I'm curious about it. But at the same time, I think that it is actually only tangential and only very marginally so to the primary issues around gun safety legislation in the country.
Yeah, and also I think we want to see justice for the families of Sandy Hook victims. I wonder if after Sandy Hook happened, if we were able to pass like the most basic gun control measures like universal background checks, magazine capacity limits, the things that Congress failed to do after Sandy Hook. If that had happened, would the families have pushed this case, trying to hold Remington responsible? Maybe they would have been able to like take some solace in the fact that, well, even though their kids were killed in this horrible massacre, at least the gun culture in the country is changing. At least the gun laws in the country are changing because they didn't even get that. Maybe that was what led them to pursue this litigation.
Well,
here.
One of the arguments that's being made, interestingly enough, is about even if the lawsuits fail to find a judgment in favor of the plaintiffs against the gun manufacturers, you could make the case that the mere fact that the lawsuits are being filed might get the manufacturers and or the dealers to rethink how they do business, and that could create some systemic change to some degree, even if it doesn't do much for these particular families, which is, I mean, we have to wait and see, but that's an interesting angle as well, which is maybe this will scare the gun manufacturers enough that a lawsuit got through, even if it fails, into changing some of their practices. We will see. We don't know. Going from guns to vaping, so remind me, Pat, was it a 90-day vaping ban here in Massachusetts?
It was a 4-month ban that was supposed to go into January.
So one of the questions around vaping has been, you had people who vaped who came down with what are being described as vaping-related injuries. And the question was, what is it in the vaping products that is causing these injuries? It doesn't seem to be the nicotine in and of itself. It doesn't seem to be the THC in and of itself. But any reasonable person, I would hope, I mean, maybe I'm speaking too optimistically, but I would hope that people would realize that this is not healthy for you. It might be less acutely unhealthy in a particular way than smoking is unhealthy for you, but to expect that this is just an action that you can take with no consequences never made sense to me. But the question is, what is it in the vaping products that is actually causing a problem? There have now been tests of lung samples taken from 29 patients with vaping-related injuries. And it appears as though all of those were vaping products that contained vitamin E acetate. And this was, I believe this was suspected for a while, Pat. Like this was now confirmed, but I believe that for some time it was suspected that that might be the particular substance that is causing the problems here. And this is being called the first direct evidence of a link between a particular substance and the vaping-related injuries. So what does this mean? We don't know. At this point in time, it is unclear if this is the only substance that is the problematic, the acutely problematic one, other than the fact that the vaping process itself, while sounding very innocuous, is actually the aerosolization of chemicals, which is, of course, not good for you. This may get us on the path, Pat, to saying this is the one substance, we've got to get rid of this substance, and then opening the doors again on vaping.
Yeah, do you think it's fair for these vaping companies to take out that one element, that vitamin E acetate, and then try to re-enter them into the market? Maybe these governments like Massachusetts, which banned it temporarily, will be able to reinstitute, allowing people to purchase vapes. Would that be all well and good? I mean, certainly there are health problems that can result long-term from people vaping, but I think people are generally aware of that. These like extreme cases where people have to have like these double lung transplants and, get put in the hospital for weeks at a time because of what was this one substance in the vaping thing. Like once we can figure out that we can take that out, do you think that it would make sense that we can now re-enter this back into the market?
I mean, listen, makes sense. What are we saying when we say, does it make sense? In the narrow way in which what is legal in this industry is defined, if we can say the problem is it's either the vitamin E acetate or the interaction between the vitamin E acetate and nicotine and or THC, then I guess the answer would be yes. It would make sense under this logic to re-legalize these products in places like Massachusetts that have temporarily banned them. Bigger picture, I mean, listen, if marijuana is illegal, I don't understand why why are cigarettes legal? I mean, this is a bigger problem that I've been talking about for a really long time. And I am not like a nanny stater, but I'm also not totally libertarian on this issue. And I think that there is a lot of marketing to uninformed populations for a lot of these products. So I don't know. The bigger question of vaping in general, I know that there are lots, even people I'm friends with on Facebook who say it is a restriction on freedom to ban vaping. It's discriminatory if cigarettes are legal or whatever. That's a bigger question. Under the narrow scope of the temporary ban here in Massachusetts, if this is the cause, you probably do re-legalize it if you determine this to be the cause.
Yeah, and it's so unfortunate how it seems as though the tobacco industry in particular has found a way to come up with the next generation of tobacco users and smokers and vapors.
Yeah.
I remember I took a health class in high school, and the teacher said, your generation is actually doing really well with smoking rates. They're declining. You people are smoking way less than previous generations did, and this trajectory is going in the right direction. I remember thinking, that's great. We don't want people smoking cigarettes. But it seems like now, and it happened really quick, with Juuls becoming so popular, you've just created the next generation of people addicted to nicotine, and like who knows how that will play out. And if people no longer want to use vapes and they want to go to the traditional cigarettes, I think the tobacco industry was successful in that effort, and they've created their next generation of customers.
No question about it. And again, very importantly, number one, with flavors for a lot of these that, I mean, listen, okay, the flavors can appeal to anyone, but they're sort of more appealing to younger people in some cases. And also all under the guise of this is less unhealthy than that other thing or this other thing, when in some narrow way it may be true, in other ways it may be not true, and we may not actually know for many years. So we'll continue following it, and we'll see what happens here in Massachusetts. We talked maybe last week or the week before about how McDonald's fired its CEO because although he had a legal consensual relationship with an employee, it violated the ethical guidelines of McDonald's. And they said he's not accused of sexual harassment. This was completely consensual, but it violated company policy, and we've got to get him out. He's still getting a nice golden parachute worth many, many millions of dollars. There is now a new problem at McDonald's, which is not only did they get rid of their CEO for this because it violated their guidelines, it has also led to a flurry of allegations about rampant abuse and harassment of female employees at the fast food chain. It's starting at some specific franchises. I believe McDonald's is a combination of corporate-owned stores and franchise-owned stores. I believe it's both. And there are now lawyers representing workers with more than 50 claims and charges of harassment of female employees. And this is going to become a bigger thing, no question. Now, you will see, no doubt, in the cases of the franchises, McDonald's probably do what Amazon does with its delivery drivers that are third party, which is say, these aren't even really our employees. These are the employees of the franchisee, and you've got to go talk to them. But this is going to hit McDonald's. Corporate-owned stores certainly are going to fall into the mix. And the trouble's not ending anytime soon for McDonald's. And you know what? I don't have to make any change as a result of this, Pat, because I already haven't been to a McDonald's in 18 years, and I'm going to continue not going.
Yeah, that's probably true. It's not going to change much for you. Even if they have the Impossible Burger at McDonald's, you probably still won't go there.
Indeed.
Yeah, I mean, I think this makes sense in a way. Like, if there really is rampant sexual harassment going on at McDonald's across the country, there should be a class action lawsuit. But do you think it makes sense that this follows from what happened with the CEO being ousted? Because we talked about that last week, I think. It's not as if the CEO was engaging in sexual harassment himself.
No.
Maybe you can call it sexual misconduct, I suppose, because he was having a relationship with an employee, but nothing that he did was illegal, that's for sure, and nothing that he did was it's so difficult to say, because you can say it's untoward because there's like a power dynamic issue there.
Well, that's the one thing. If you want to say it definitely wasn't coercive, it's a little bit more of a debate, because when you have a power dynamic, I don't know, but we don't even have to argue that is the thing, because
it's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing. Yeah, no question about it.
So like, I mean, but do you think that they can successfully make that argument, though, that this and maybe position it so that this is the time to push forward with the class action lawsuit because it's coming off the heels of the CEO being ousted?
I agree with you that there's no question that what is being alleged in these complaints is very different than what the CEO did. But I do think that there is a sort of culture that has risen of, hey, we saw what happened with the CEO. Something happened to me and I'm going to come forward with it, even if it's not the same thing the CEO did. So yeah, there's no doubt that it's different, but I do think that it is related.
Yeah, and it is in a sense irrelevant in a sense, because when they assess the class action lawsuit, they probably won't even look at this. They'll just take a look at the individual cases of sexual harassment. So like maybe from a public viewing perspective, it makes sense to put this story forward now, because people are paying attention to McDonald's and the policy when it comes to relationships and sexual harassment there now more so than they were before. And also, I mean, the fact that many of these McDonald's are franchised out, how will that play in? Because can you hold the corporation responsible for what takes place at these individually operated locations? I don't know about that. That I think is an open question.
Yes, certainly the McDonald's will say that you can't, in the same way that Amazon says when their overnight delivery drivers get into an accident because they have to deliver a package every 30 seconds in order to stay on schedule or whatever, every 2 minutes. They say, oh, erratic driving, listen, we contracted with ABCD Pat Ford Logistics. That's not, they don't work for us. Whoever Pat Ford hires, that's his problem. It's not our problem. That is certainly what McDonald's is going to do.
Yeah, imagine me running a logistics company. I think it would probably fail pretty quickly. I don't think I would be able to handle that.
It doesn't
I think I would have a nervous breakdown.
Like a particularly pleasurable business to run. That's for sure, at least from the articles that I've read. We're going to follow McDonald's. We will follow the lawsuits against Remington. We are going to follow all of it and much more coming up on a new show tomorrow and a new bonus show tomorrow. I hope you'll join me then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.